Institute of Clinical Excellence. Good morning. My name is Justin Jones with my partner in crime, Christina Previtt. We teach modern management of the older adult course, and we just our week 3 meeting, which is crazy. We're already 3 weeks into this course. The next course is going to be June 12th. You can hop in on that. We would love to have you. But week 3, we had a really good conversation last night on risk and reward and kind of how we think about that in the geriatric circle. The discussion is the most dangerous exercise for older adults. And, you know, I'm sure whenever you hear that, you probably think of a handful of exercises that come to mind. I know for me, the deadlift is one. I consider that to be kind of a risky exercise. You know, we can do it with some people. There's some really interesting studies like the LIFTMOR trial that's utilizing a deadlift in you know what we would commonly consider high risk individuals. But you run a risk for vertebral fractures. You know, a lot of our patients may be osteoporotic, so we need to be careful with deadlifts. We can use them, but we may need to be a little careful. Floor transfers are another one. That's a big issue in the geriatric circle. Can people get up from the ground in a safe manner? Because falls can be an issue. They need to be able to do things around their home, that are on the ground. So floor transfers we need to work on, but they can be risky. Someone could fall, they could hurt themselves. But if you can't get them up off the ground, that's something to really think about. Good morning, Kristen. How you doing? Another one, squats. Squats are a big one. Zach Long just joined. He's a big proponent of squats, and they can be a little risky in the older adult. Knee pain, hip pain, you can have some issues there, and you may want to be a little careful with that activity. But I'm here not to say that deadlifts, floor transfers, squats are the most dangerous exercise for older adults, but I believe the most dangerous exercise is the ankle pump. Dum, dum, dum. Ankle pumps. Yes, ankle pumps are very, very risky. And let me tell you why, or how I perceive this. Ankle pumps are one of the most commonly used exercises in our wheelhouse. Regardless of your setting, you have seen that good old tibio-talar, plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, sometimes with resistance, usually not, just active range of motion. But it's used in the ICU, used in nursing facilities, in home health, even in outpatient orthopedics. They do have their place. Tomorrow, when I see a particular patient I'm thinking of, I'm going to use ankle pumps, and it's going to be helpful for her. So I'm not here to say that ankle pumps are the worst thing ever, that we should never use them. They do have their place in specific situations, but in many situations with older adults, I would consider them to be dangerous, and not because you run a risk of DVTs or if someone has an unstable fracture. But if you are performing ankle pumps with many older adults in certain situations, you are not capitalizing on a very, very unique opportunity that we have as physical therapists. So think about the typical scenario of many older adults that you all work with. Many of the people that listen to this podcast are in typically an outpatient setting. So you may have someone come in, they may have some bit of joint pain, whether it's back pain or knee pain or what have you, and you want to address their concerns, which is typically their pain. But many of the patients that you all serve, that I serve in home health, are on a very, very thin line between community dwelling, functional older adult, and someone that needs more assistance, someone that may be considered homebound, someone that may need to be institutionalized. That line is very thin. And for me in home health, I have a better perspective of that line, because a lot of my patients, they need a lot more assistance, they need a lot more help. But in the outpatient world, you may not have the best perspective. You see people walk into your clinic, you see them for that hour, but you have no clue what their life is like once they leave that clinic. You have no idea how they're getting around in their home, the situations that they find themselves, what they have to do in their home. And so many of the people that we serve have a very limited functional reserve. A lot of their activities of daily living, the responsibilities that they may have, making max efforts. They may be performing 80% of their 1 rep max to do their laundry, to carry their groceries, to do some of these different things. This is a very, very common scenario with older people, maybe on that frailty spectrum. And so if that is a common scenario that we see, what are we doing with ankle pumps? Are we best serving them? Are we utilizing this opportunity to kind of push the needle forward to where we can improve their strength, improve their functional outcomes, improve their gait, make them more independent? Why are we not maximizing that opportunity that we have with that person to make a big difference in the trajectory of their life going forward? And I would argue ankle pumps is not a great way to do that with most of our patients, that we may need to get them standing. We may need to do progressive resistance exercise in a weight-bearing manner. Maybe do deadlifts, maybe do squats, maybe do loaded carries, floor transfers, some of these different things that have a big translation into the real. So that's what I want you all to think about in terms of risk when you are thinking about your older adult patients. Yes, we need to think about the potential injuries that could happen. We don't want to cause any aches and pains. We don't want to cause any issues, but think about the risk of you underdosing your exercises and doing something like the ankle pump. That is a very, very dangerous activity. You have a very unique opportunity to impact someone's life, and we could potentially be wasting it if we are not properly dosing our patients, and especially dosing our exercise in a way that's actually going to impact their actual life and what they want to achieve. So if ankle pumps are dangerous, what do we do? Well, how do we make sure that we do prescribe proper exercises, and then we dose them appropriately with appropriate intensity to have an impact on these people? And I just want to mention three things, and many things we've talked about on this podcast before, but this kind of came up in our conversation last night in the week 3 cohort of Modern Management of the Older Adult. The first thing that we all need to be doing is we need to assess and not assume. This is common that we just assume that people are generally weak, that they would benefit from resisted dorsiflexion, or they need to do long arc quads. We need to do a thorough assessment. We need to actually see that they have a specific deficit and tailor our interventions to that deficit. We make a lot of assumptions with older adults, but we need to actually assess them to get accurate, objective information on what we're seeing in that patient. Our interventions should have a very, very strong correlation to our patient's goals. So think about someone that may live in a second floor apartment. They have to go up and down steps. So let's say you assume that they have ankle dorsiflexion weakness, and let's say they have to go up and down stairs. If you prescribe ankle pumps, is that going to be helpful for them to be able to go up and down the stairs when they don't even have ankle dorsiflexion weakness? This is a very common scenario that we see, in regardless of setting. But it's a very common scenario. So, okay, they need to go up and down stairs. You may need to work on some unilateral lower extremity work. You may need to do some step-ups. You may need to do some squats. There's all kinds of things that we can do. But our interventions need to have a strong correlation to what they need to be able to do. I have a very distinct advantage in the home setting because I see what people, the environment that they live in, the things that they struggle with, what they need to be able to do. In the outpatient setting, you have to dig deep. You have to really have these conversations with people to really get an idea of how you can best serve them to reach their goals and to impact their quality of life. So our interventions have to have a strong correlation to our patient's goals. And last, we need to measure intensity. Now, for you all that read any research around strength training, strength and conditioning, when we talk about strength training, especially measuring intensity, you're almost always going to see a 1 rep max. Almost every article that we read works off of a percentage of a 1 rep max. How many of you all have done a 1 rep max in a physical therapy clinic? If you have, comment in the post, because applause to you. I've never met anyone that's done a 1 rep max in a physical therapy clinic and use that information to tailor their their exercise program. Not to say it's a bad thing. That's kind of the gold standard if we're going to dose intensity, but it's not always the most practical, and sometimes just not a great idea with some of our patients, especially if they're a little apprehensive or in pain. What we'll commonly see is we may work off of a 1 rep max calculation. And this is something I think is very handy and probably a little more applicable for many of us in the different settings. So you can do a max rep test. So let's say I have a 10-pound kettlebell in my trunk. I go into my patient's home. We're going to be working on squatting. I can give that person that 10-pound kettlebell, say, all right, do as many goblet squats as you can. If we go up to anywhere below 15 repetitions, I can plug that number into an app or a website, and I'll post the links in this post when I'm done. But you can get that person's estimated 1 rep max. You have that number, and then you can work off those percentages to make sure you're dosing your exercises at an appropriate intensity, so you're not underdosing them, so you're not wasting that opportunity to move the needle forward. So 1 rep max calculation is a very, very handy tool that you can use. But honestly, what I use most often, and what I've seen mostly in the clinic, and probably the most practical and the best way to start for anyone that's not measuring intensity, is a good old RPE, rating of perceived exertion. There is a scale called the Omni-Res scale that you can leverage. It has a graph. I'll put a link in the post as well, but it's someone lifting weights, scale of 0 to 10, 0 being no effort or hardly any effort, and 10 being extremely hard, that you can have a patient perform that, whatever exercise it is, and then have them answer, how hard was that on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being extremely hard, show them the picture and have them point, and then you have a good idea of how difficult that was. We typically want people kind of between that 5 to 8 range is a good, good place to start. At a bare minimum, it should be a 3, according to the research on percentages of 1 rep max and RPE. Dale Avers' white paper on strength training for the older adult is a great reference for that. But at the bare minimum, a 3, but typically want to be kind of in that 5 to 7, 5 to 8 range. As someone's more experienced or has been training longer, then we can really bump it up. But early on, you want to be kind of in that mid-range. But that Omni-Res scale is super helpful, super easy. You can put that on your tablet, you can put it on your clipboard, but you can leverage that to make sure you are dosing your exercise at an appropriate intensity so you're not wasting people's time. So that's it. 3 steps. Assess, don't assume. You want your interventions to have a strong correlation to that patient's goals, and you want to measure intensity. That way, you will be able to really have an influence on that older adult that walks into your clinic that may be in there for that low back pain, but in reality, in the bigger scheme of things, they're at falls risk, they're likely frail, they may have sarcopenia, they may be osteoporotic. They are on a very, very thin line between being an independent, functioning older adult that is living a high quality of life and someone that may be homebound or need further care. And you all have a very unique opportunity to influence them. So don't waste it on ankle pumps, people. Yeah. All right, that's enough for my soapbox. Let's talk about what's going on at ICE, all right? PTOnice.com, there's lots of courses going on. So this weekend, April 21st and 22nd, 3 courses, all right? If y'all are bored this weekend, you want to learn, you want to meet some of these people, you want to be challenged, listen up. Jessica Davis, she's in Peachtree City, Georgia for C-Spine Management. I saw Jessica speak for the first time at the Sampler. I'm still sore from some of the exercises that she had us doing. She's an amazing speaker. Highly recommend that course. Mitch and Ryan are doing the Fitness Athlete in New York City, Manhattan. Justin Dunaway's in Minneapolis for Total Motivation. And then April 28th through 29th, Eric Chaconis is going to be Sioux City, Iowa for Extremity Syndrome Management. And then the next cohort of the Modern Management of the Older Adult is going to be on June 12th. So go ahead, hop in on that. We already have a couple people signed up. So seats are going to go quick as that time approaches, so go ahead and snag that. All of that information can be found at ptonice.com. And be sure to check the Facebook post for this PT on Ice episode, as I'm going to throw a bunch of links in there referencing some of the things I just discussed. You all have a lovely day. I'll talk to you in a couple weeks.